Gali, Mera, Galispera, Galinichta, no matter where in this weird and wonderful, wacky world you might be. Thank you for making the Highbury Squad part of your day. This is a trilogy of a conversation, and we're hitting part 2 tonight with a very special guest. Let's rock and roll, people. Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad. And welcome back to Squad Central. A few of you probably watching the game tonight, hoping to get a glimpse of Saka because you've missed him so much. Those who are listening on our audio platforms, thank you so much for tuning in. And welcome back to Squad Central, one of my favourite humans, let alone Arsenal people, Mr. Tom Canton from the Gooner Talk TV.
Hello, how are we doing? You okay?
Doing pretty good. Yeah, doing pretty good. Not too bad at all. We've been going live every night this week. We're mixing it up a little bit, keeping people company during the international break. How have you been coping so far, Tom?
Yeah, it's pretty rubbish, isn't it? Yeah, it sucks. I was playing golf today, so that took my mind off things for a few hours. And then obviously England playing right now, and we're just kind of sitting with our fingers crossed that Saka makes it through without any issues. England winning 1-0 as things stand. Declan Rice with the goal. So, yeah, interesting.
Very nice. Okay, lovely. Well, listen, you and I had a conversation in October about Gabriel and, you know, the conversation was inspired by your article in Football London, which I've shared, by the way, on our community page. You guys can see this, and it's also being added to the description on the show. It's on our Twitter as well. And when I read that, I was like, I've got to talk to Tom about this because I just don't understand why Arsenal fans are getting on his back. If we can just remind people of that just a second, for just a little bit before we move on to the following article, Tom, is, you know, at the time, the transfer window was a month and a bit away, and Gabriel was having some issues. I think you and I talked about how Benjamin White had gone through a similar arc. We've seen William Saliba go through a similar arc post-World Cup. You know, there was the left-footed conversation. Juventus were looking for a central defender, and it felt like at the time he was under fire from our fans, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. I wrote that piece. Obviously, the reach of Football London is limited to whoever reads the articles, and also, of course, to your channel in which we spoke about this topic, and my channel that I was speaking about it on there. But it felt as though it was a necessary thing at that time to talk about because there was a real concern that Gabriel would become the next Arsenal scapegoat, and there's just this. I love Arsenal fans no matter where in the world they're coming from, and I'm going to visit obviously some Arsenal fans elsewhere, but I get frustrated sometimes. There always seems to be this necessity amongst our fan base to have to find somebody to kind of lean on negatively. Sometimes it feels at the moment that person is a little bit as Fabio Vieira, a little bit, which is a shame. But then when I think it was October that we had the discussion, it was Gabriel who'd had a little bit of a shaky start to the season. But since then, for me, right now, at this very moment, I think he's the best centre-half in the Premier League at this moment in time. And I think he has been absolutely mega for us in terms of a potential title win this season. So, yeah, I'm so glad that things turned so swiftly.
Yeah, brilliant stuff. You know, I'm so rude. When Kevin is not here, I totally forget to salute everybody. I'm so sorry, squaddies. I deserve a yellow card for that. I didn't even say hello to you. So I'm giving myself a yellow card. It's an awful display.
Yellow former teacher highlighter. There you go.
It's an awful display for a host, to be honest with you. Really shoddy. Yellow card for me. It's my second of the season, Tom. So I'm doing okay. All right. So I loved that. And that was a great show. We got a lot of positive response to that. And what I like about the articles that you write is you make people think a little bit. You put something out there. You're not necessarily saying this is, you know, what I think, but there's a genuine conversation to be had. about whether or not, this guy is challenging Saka. And of course, his captain for the Arsenal Player of the Year. Now, you did an article at the beginning of March. Gabriel Magalhães avoids scapegoat status to become Arsenal and League's best central defender. So before we go to the Player of the Year, I want to go to article number 2. Where do you think the turn happened for him? Was it being left out of Brazil's World Cup squad? Where did the elevation happen and the turn in his game for you, Tom?
Yeah, I think that since the World Cup, certainly we've seen Gabriel just rise and rise and rise. I also think that post World Cup, Saliba's performances were a bit more down than what we'd experienced in the first half of the season, and I think that enabled us to kind of see Gabriel rise above his partner, who had probably stolen the majority of the limelight up until the World Cup, and he obviously didn't play too much during that World Cup, frustratingly for him. And I think that since that point, yeah, Gabriel has been able to take that game to another level, be that with his distribution, which has been really good. But I think also that the reliability of Zinchenko in the first half of the season, we had Tomiyasu playing some games, we had Tierney playing some games because Zinchenko's fitness wasn't consistent enough. I mean, there were even discussions about, if we'd signed the right guy because of his fitness issues. But since Zinchenko's come back, Gabriel's basically had to learn the role of 1.5 players because he has to cover not only the left centre-back role, but he has to cover a lot of the left-back space because Zinchenko doesn't operate like a typical left-back, and he explores and he ventures forwards and he plays as basically a fourth central midfielder with our current central three that we have. And I think that Gabriel and that relationship with Zinchenko has enabled him to elevate his game so that we can notice it a lot more, but also his goals. They've cropped up in big games. Just before the World Cup, we had the Chelsea win in which he scored that goal. And of course, more recently, we saw him score again against Fulham to kick off things in that fixture. So, yeah, I think last season he was the highest scoring defender in the league. And I think he's level with Saliba this season for that as well. So, yeah, it's very impressive.
Yeah, this was him celebrating his goal against Fulham. Actually, I was at that game that was really close right in front of me and made that mistake. Didn't he? Mitrovic scored. We talk about bounce back ability, but after losing a game collectively as a team, but the Saliba own goal, the Gabriel mistake early in the season, you saw that bounce back ability as individuals in games as well as collectively as a team, like we've seen this season. And this was just a really great moment for him because he had made the mistake, and he got the winning goal. I think someone there from Ashburton was very excited and wanted to show a lot of love for him on the day. In this article, Tom, as well, your headline is avoids the scapegoat status, not only to become Arsenal's best central defender, but you're talking about the league's best defender. I feel like even now Benjamin White is getting a little bit more respect than G6. Saliba somehow has earned this immediate cult hero status where, dare I say, he's untouchable, but yet has been criticized a little bit post-World Cup. Before we get on to the other defenders in the league, I just want to talk a little bit about if you think it's fair or foul of me to say that he's the least respected of that group.
Yeah, it's one of those. It's like if you go onto Twitter and you say you don't like pancakes, someone comes at you saying, "Well, why don't you like waffles as well?" sort of thing. And it's just because we're saying he's the least respected doesn't mean we're saying that he's not respected. It's just
Correct.
like the rest of that group is so highly appreciated. Ben White, I think, has gone from the underrated player to very much the rated player, especially with his transition to right back and what he's done this season. William Saliba is a very fashionable player. He's come, we've been yearning to see him play and to get into this Arsenal team. And there was all this concern that there was some kind of issue and that he hadn't got him in. I mean, how quickly that's been forgotten about. And then Zinchenko is like this brand new, fresh style of player that we've never seen before in an Arsenal shirt. And he's come in and completely overtaken that left-back role for his own. And we never thought Kieran Tierney would get ousted in the foreseeable future, but that's happened and he's been brilliant. So yeah, I think Gabriel is arguably the least respected because is he the oldest? No, I think Zinchenko's slightly older, a year older. I think he's 25, but he's the longest serving Arsenal player in terms of, I know Saliba was at the club before him, but obviously in terms of the years that he's spent playing for Arsenal, he's been here longer than anyone else. Saliba's in his first season, White's in his second season, Zinchenko's in his first season, Gabriel's in his third, now. So I think that sometimes, when you've been around a while, you kind of fans get familiar with you. And so maybe you lose that sheen that you get when you first join, like both Saliba and Zinchenko have this time around. And Ben White's been able to kind of keep that sheen because he's moved into a brand new position this season as well. So, yeah, I think that's probably fair to say he's the least. It's a weird term, isn't it? Respected, because I think everyone respects, what Gabriel does now, but least appreciated, maybe.
Yeah, maybe that's the correct terminology, appreciation. Because of course, as you guys know, we have a tremendous amount of respect for all of them and the waffles has taken off in the chat, of course, now I'm hungry and I want some waffles. But yeah, no, maybe appreciated is a better way of saying it. So let's now shift into that rest of the league a piece in the article that you bring up, because I feel like someone like Romero's been lauded, right? Virgil van Dijk. I mean, the conversations where they're comparing him to Ferdinand and all sorts of players, and some I heard Jason Cundy on Talksport. He thinks he's very overrated. He doesn't think he can lace Rio Ferdinand's boots. Ruben Diaz, of course, who I love. I mean, I love most Manchester City players. And Koulibaly is another player that you mentioned. Why? Talk me through the comparison, because I think a lot of the times when you have these conversations, you see these conversations on other shows or you see pundits talking about them. Those are the royalty of defenders currently in the Premier League. I do feel like Gabriel is getting a little bit more talked up. But how does he compare to those names that seem to get all the lauding from others?
Yeah, well, I think that, there are obviously certain aspects of those players that compare, not in more impressively, but they outrank Gabriel because of the situations. Arsenal have dominated so much possession this season that, Gabriel's not necessarily putting in the same defensive duel numbers that Liverpool's Van Dijk is, because Liverpool haven't been as good this season. So they're actually coming under more pressure, which gives them Van Dijk more opportunities to make more tackles and get into more duels and make more interceptions. But it's what Gabriel does in terms of his consistency, which is helping him shine. His aerially, he's been very, very good. His distribution, his passing has been very, very good. That pass to Trossard in the Everton game, the one that looped over that he then set up Martinelli for the goal. These types of passes are becoming a lot more common. I did a piece, I think it was last month, looking specifically at kind of the types of passing that he's now getting into his game. And it is that pass out to that left flank, be it to Martinelli or Zinchenko, that's enabling, or Trossard sometimes, well, depending on who's playing on the left-hand side, that's certainly enabling him to kind of beat Diaz, beats Van Dijk, beats these types of defenders in terms of the consistency of his passing in those zones. So, yeah, I think it's important to remember that obviously context is king, and obviously different clubs have different scenarios which enable different players in different positions to kind of boost stats in certain zones. You look at a goalkeeper, for instance, they might have an amazing number of saves, but you wouldn't say they're better than Ederson or Alisson or Ramsdale because those goalkeepers are clearly better, but they're not facing as many shots on goal because they're playing for teams higher up the table. It's the same situation for defenders. So, yeah, look, I think he's comparing very, very well. But I think the key word with Gabriel has been consistency. And I think he's just been more consistent. The reason why I compared him to Koulibaly at the beginning of the season was because Koulibaly was playing for Chelsea regularly. But now you look at the two, and Koulibaly can't get too many minutes, for Chelsea at times. And they've obviously brought in, Fofana's come back from injury. They've brought in Badiashile as well, and they've gone mad in the market. And yeah, it's strange how, you look at a club like Chelsea that constantly feel like they're churning out these transfers in different positions, not just since Todd Bowley's come in, but for a long time. It wasn't Todd Bowley that spent 80-odd million on Kepa. And it wasn't Todd Bowley that spent another 30 million on Ødegaard Mendy. And it probably won't be. I said it will probably then be Tolly then spends a lot of money on another goalkeeper in whatever transfer window's time. But Arsenal have kept Gabriel since 2020, have developed him, nurtured him, improved him, and given him that faith that he is going to be our starting centre-back for the foreseeable future. And that has enabled him to rise into the top ranks of centre-backs in the league. I think you're muted, Soph. I can't hear you.
That's Vinny's fault. It's beautifully put because, there's growth. When you see growth, there was a a stigma almost attached to Mikel Arteta in that first 14 months that he's not improving anybody, right? And that he wasn't improving players. I mean, Saka's evolution's been incredible. Martinelli's has been incredible. Xhaka, incredible. You look at Gabriel. I mean, seriously, and I've called them Beauty and the Beast, Saliba and he. But there's sometimes with his passing, and I just wanted to touch on that with you because I think that's one of the things that those others do get credit for. There's been a couple of people in chat saying, "I wish he'd stop with those long passes," but in your article, you had an image of it. And you were showing exactly the trajectory of the pass and, who was going to sweeping out to the left and stuff. Is Zinchenko the reason why that's happening now? Is that part of like in training, Arteta's having a word, the way Zinchenko plays. So now Gabriel's had to adapt his game. You talked about that a little bit. Is he the sole reason why we're seeing those kinds of passes? A couple of those questions came in just real quick.
Yeah, no, I think Zinchenko, because he plays so internally, you're not typically playing the ball out to him. He does sometimes. There is a combinations between Gabriel and Zinchenko. But Ben White did an interview, I think it was last season, where he said when he was playing centre-back, he said, if I have to pass the ball to Tomiyasu, right fullback, something's going wrong because that's not the type of pass that Arteta wants. The pass to when the fullback gets the ball is typically from a midfielder. It's not coming from the centre back. And if it's coming from the centre back, it's because we're too suppressed and we're being the pressure from the opposition team is very good and there isn't any other option. So typically what you see is the pass go from the centre back to the midfielder to the fullback, or from the centre back to the winger and then inside. That's the two main types of passes that we tend to see. Of course, the midfielder can play to the wingers as well. But you tend to see Gabriel playing out to Martinelli. Martinelli will drop. He'll move into that left space, wide space, and Gabriel play that ball through. Zinchenko will run into the half space on the inside and then sometimes get a ball back. You'll sometimes see Xhaka pop up in those areas, and then Martinelli can do the triangles that we often see in the Arsenal forward line. So, yeah, Gabriel's being tasked with doing that, and that's all down to Arteta. Less so, specifically it being one player. It's all down to the system that Arteta's trying to deploy to stretch the opposition.
Which is why Kieran's like I know him, which is why Tierney is suffering a little bit from, being able to get into the first team. By the way, don't be very careful about saying half spaces if you run into Tim Sherwood. Okay. Just hold back on that. Yeah.
How ridiculous.
Yeah. Little dinosaur. Bless his cotton socks. Although
I've got a whole pice on half spaces if people want to read it. So I'm sure
share
he'd love
it.
that.
There's crazies out there that enjoy reading that stuff. Yeah. I mean, do I like low block? Do I feel like it's a little bit wanky and people overuse it just to act smart? Some people, yes. But we'll just move on from that. All right. So before we get into the recent article, which prompted my call to you for us to have a discussion today, where we go into the rationale for him maybe making a case that he could be the Arsenal's player of the year. I wanted to talk about his personality, because this team all of a sudden has gone from zero personalities or very few personalities, or personalities like this. Sorry to rag on these guys over and over again. And apologies for the Mesut Ozil show yesterday. You clearly showed what you felt like about that in your numbers. Stop talking about Mesut Ozil. Fine. Because we have moved on to beautiful things like this. And I think G6 has a lot to do with the vibe in the team. Zinchenko gets a lot of credit. Jesus early in the season. Martin Ødegaard has just stepped into this role as captain. Xhaka is just a born leader, whether he's wearing the armband or not. But seeing him develop these types of partnerships, friendships, and when you see this stuff going on, someone did this post saying the bromance we never really knew existed. Talk to me a little bit about his personality and how he fits into this team that is all of a sudden full of personalities.
Yeah, I think that, what's always going to be crucial from Arteta's standpoint is having someone who is utterly focused during the 90 minutes, that is going to give full focus the whole time. And that means that's not just about, fully concentrating. That's about being aware of those around you as well and understanding what other people's roles are, not just your own. Because if someone's not pulling their weight, you need to tell them. You know, because Arteta can only scream from the sidelines. He needs his leaders on the field. And he's got that in abundance, be it, you know, with his captain Ødegaard, be it with the Zinchenko that's coming, be it Jesus when he plays, but Gabriel as well. You know, I think his communication is coming on leaps and bounds. He speaks French with Saliba. He speaks Portuguese with his fellow Brazilian and Portuguese players in the team. And he's learning English gradually as well. It's still not amazing. You know, I've asked a couple of times for Gabriel in the mix zone after games, and the club are still a little bit reluctant to give him to the media because he's still not 100% there. And there's also, you know, from our perspective, we want someone who's going to be able to give good answers, which is often why we speak to the likes of Ødegaard or Xhaka, who are really good at speaking. Jesus was really good at speaking as well. So Zinchenko was after Villa. He was very good at speaking. But Gabriel is still, even after 3 years, he's still, you know, getting to grips with the English language. And that'll come, you know, to challenge someone to learn a completely new language is always going to take time. He lives here, so that helps. And it is going to be Portuguese to English. Horrible transition.
Yeah,
Horrible
you know, Tom, I think sometimes people think it's so easy. Like there are, and some people think footballers aren't smart, right? Do you know how many languages so many different footballers speak?
Yeah.
I mean, it's insane. And, you know, Jonathan Dos Santos, who I covered here for a little bit, whose English was so much better than he thought, but it was his own confidence and his own comfortability that prevented him from doing that. And then there was a time where it's like, come on, you can do it. And he did it. And then after that, he just kept coming back and he was like, I've got one for you in English. So there's a little bit of that self-confidence. I wouldn't feel comfortable going out and speaking German or French, even though I could order a bottle of wine in both languages. You know what I mean?
You
know what I mean?
You got to learn the necessities. That's, you know, it's important to learn the things you must be able to speak. Yeah.
But I do think that his leadership has grown, and you know, and his personality. I feel like there's imprints of personalities on this team now. Mikel has made the team an image of him, and now you're seeing mini Mikels on the pitch, who are infusing some of their personality into what he wants to do as a manager, and I think it's a really beautiful thing. So now let's get on to this question of the sexy role, right? Odegaard, Saka, you know, the sexy forward positions. Even when you look at awards at the end of the season, unless it's a category for defender, the last time a Ballon d'Or was handed to a defender was Cannavaro, and he had to win the World Cup to make that happen. So why is he in your conversation? I know you've talked about comparing him to the other defenders, but in relation to Arsenal, why is he part of your conversation?
Yeah, so, you know, player of the season is always going to come down to the contributions throughout the campaign. That's on the field, that's off field. That's, I think, in terms of improvement, in terms of the journey the individual player has gone on throughout the campaign, the way in which they've stood out. And obviously the relationship, I think, with the supporters as well is also going to be really important. Saka and Ødegaard are your main two, I think. I think Partey comes into it as well, you know, for his importance. He's had a brilliant season. But I think Saka and Ødegaard are your main two. So whoever you're talking about outside those two have to try and compete with their contribution. And I think genuinely that Gabriel brings and has brought throughout the whole course of this season, certainly more so since the World Cup. And I think that's been a growth that is also something that should be taken into account when you're looking at the awards for player of the season, is the consistency that he's brought, the threat in both boxes that he brings, the way in which he has to operate in 1.5 roles on the pitch. No, Saka, right winger, Ødegaard, right side 8. Gabriel is operating in a space far bigger than those two players. He's having to cope with the pressures of when we get hit on the counter and there's less cover for him. He's not the quickest, but he certainly is improving, I think, how he learns to time his runs. He's got that Per Mertesacker level of kind of understanding and reading of the game of when he needs to turn, when he needs to accelerate, when he needs to push in. And I think what you saw from Rob Holding against Crystal Palace when he dove in for that tackle and then Zaha was clear through, you don't see that from Gabriel anymore. His timing of his challenges has got much better. Remember, there was a tackle, I think it's on Leon Bailey in the Villa game in the box, where he just kind of waits for him and then bang, takes the ball away from him, even though it's in the box. He's still not perfect, and there's not many players in this team that are, and that's obviously down to the fact that they're all still very young and they can all improve. But I think in terms of the improvements that we've seen in distribution, consistency, discipline, timing of tackling, timing of decision-making, he has come on and improved more, I think, than anyone else in this squad. And he's performing at a level that I think equates to the likes of Saka and Martinelli in terms of his contribution to a potential title-winning season.
I'm sold. I'm voting for him. It's there's a point that's coming. Let's have a question. Get your questions in for Tom, by the way. I've marked a few already, but let's see. G-Dog, how did we end up with a team of leaders all of a sudden? I mentioned that, and you've talked about it. Recruitment is just indicative. Anyone who questions our recruitment, this question here, the answer to it for me is smart recruitment. Player DNA profile, Tom.
Yeah, I think it's that, and I think it's coaching. I think Arteta drills into these players about individual contribution vocally. He's people talk about man management is something he lacks. That's not true. I think what he lacks, I think Arteta's biggest area of improvement needs to be his in-game management and how he manages certain scenarios. His man management is actually really good. Like, he takes players aside. He's already delegated certain coaching staff to improve players on an individual basis. We saw that during the All or Nothing documentary. Arteta is absolutely key in ensuring that these players know their roles, know how to look after each other's roles, the understanding of what the others have to do on the field. And leadership comes ultimately and will always stem from the manager. So if we're seeing multiple leaders in a group, it's because he has created those leadership characters from recruitment, as you say, but also from existing players that are in the group as well. You think about Saka is a great example of someone that, you look at and say, even though he's a forward player, and I'm never usually a big fan of captains as forward players, but you could see him as a future Arsenal captain without a shadow of a doubt. He's potentially someone that you feel can be confident enough to demand more of his teammates and be confident to do that. Well, I remember when he burst onto the scene at first, really shy kid, really wouldn't want to speak up, would be like, yes, sir, sort of kind of guy. And actually now he's like, he challenges other people in the group. He asks more of his teammates. When he doesn't get a pass, you see him get frustrated. And you want that. That's good frustration. That's what you want to see from those players. So, yeah, it all stems from the manager.
Good stuff. This, again, not a question so much as a statement, and I wanted to ask if you feel there's any merit to this, because I think David Luiz was actually a little better for us than some Arsenal fans claim. I think there's a little bit of that Chelsea PTSD. Tom, are your thoughts on Amira's statement?
Yeah, I think that David Luiz enabled a transition period for Gabriel, playing next to someone that you confident language-wise, speaking with them, someone who's as experienced as he is. And there's also an element of the fact that David Luiz, no matter how much I like him, is a flawed defender. He's got his errors in him. And it's also not surprising that Gabriel's discipline has improved the further from Luiz's exit we have come. I think he's probably learned from Luiz's mistakes, learned what he did wrong. And there's an age where he can look at that and go, right, so take that on board. Not going to act in that way, not going to be rash, not going to get out of position. And I think that's helped him. But David Luiz is a great job of bedding him in, assimilating him into the group, making him feel comfortable so that when the next guy comes to replace Luiz's position, which is obviously William Saliba, you've got someone now that Gabriel's the guy that Saliba's going to look to, to try and emulate, to learn from. And I think that transition going from an experienced head to Saliba and Gabriel being the constant's been really important.
Okie doke. Let's see. A fun one from Marcus. Where's your TGT cap, Tom?
That's for the morning shows when I've got bed hair. That's what that's for.
Here's one from John Mavrodis. Yeah, we like our fellow Greeks. Saliba is clearly a remarkable talent. Is that the reason Gabriel is so underappreciated? While Saliba looks effortless, Gabriel's like a tank. I think both are brilliant and the future is hot or fire. We touched on it just a little bit. I did want to make sure that John's question was put up, and if you had anything else to add on that, Tom.
Yeah, in short, it is absolutely the reason why Gabriel's a bit underappreciated, because he's playing next to someone as generationally good as Saliba. But the fact that I think Gabriel has arguably outshone Saliba since the World Cup is all the more props to him.
Okay, here's a statement, another one for you from Boy, from our squaddies. Zinchenko has to be the player of the season on account of being so transformative, not just on the pitch, but off it too. So this is the part where stats, okay, maybe they're facts or opinions, but data, analytics. I think if you were basing it on a heat map, he would win hands down times a million plus infinity.
Yeah.
Thoughts on Zinchenko, throwing that into the
Yeah.
ring is Boy.
If he was a duvet, you could get about 20 people in the bed. Let's put it that way. You know, his coverage is mad, and I think that I understand the argument. And Boy, at the end of the season, there is going to be a lot of arguments for a lot of players for the Player of the Season award, and there is some really good examples of why Zinchenko deserves that potential candidacy. The drawbacks with Zinchenko aren't necessarily his fault. He's a victim of the system, which is a really good system, but there is always weaknesses. And I think Zinchenko is a vulnerable part of that system because if he loses it, there's a big gap behind him. And I think one of the reasons why we've been able to mitigate the vulnerabilities of Zinchenko is actually, again, Gabriel. I think Gabriel's makes up for the vulnerabilities that exist in the way that Zinchenko plays. And Gabriel has allowed Zinchenko to be as good and as transformative, and that's the right word to describe him because that's what he's exactly been. I think Gabriel enables Zinchenko to be what he is. I think the great example of showing what happens when you don't have Gabriel is the Sporting game away from home when Kivior started. Completely new to the system, has never played with an inverted left back like Zinchenko next to him, and we were overrun time and time and time again because they were just perfect at getting in behind. And Kivior did not understand kind of his role was to cover 1.5 parts of the team. And Gabriel, when he came on, with Partey coming on, we completely took control of the game again in the last 20 minutes. Now, there was only one team that was ever going to win that if the game had gone on forever, and that would have been Arsenal, because it's control that he brings.
Yeah, and you could. I think that's the first time I've seen Saliba kind of get a little angry with himself, and of course we saw the little, the conversation going off the pitch a few weeks ago. But that was the first time I saw him really frustrated. Like you could tell he was frustrated by playing with Kivior, and I'm not being disrespectful to our new player in any way, but like you said, it's difficult. And we saw that, didn't we, with other new players coming in? Benjamin White. Think about that. This is why now I'm learning myself about patience, because when you look back on some of that, and we've supported Ben since the beginning, and Tommy and all the new players that came in that window, and Aaron, and the settling in part, I think we've got evidence now where we can look back and say, okay, hold on a second. We've seen it happen now with this new team. That patience kind of needs to kick in a little bit more with some players. Right, let's get this couple more questions in for Tom. We were worried, and then we could get you out to see the second half of the match. We were worried about who would replace Partey if he was injured. I think that problem has progressively spread across a lot of positions now. Strengthening in the summer will be a proper headache. And one of the other things I've said as well, Tom, is we're in a position now where we may lose players we like.
Yeah, I like Kieran Tierney, but I think he's probably going to go in the summer. Following Balogun could potentially move on. That's part and parcel of a team, being at the top. You look at, Man City allows Zinchenko and Jesus to go. They might regret that, come the end of this season. But if you think about what they did, ultimately they never replaced Zinchenko. They brought in Sergio Gomez in, who just, he's not as good. Whereas they brought Erling Haaland in, who is obviously better than Jesus. Different style of striking than Jesus, but there's no debate. He's probably the best striker number 9 in the world right now. And, he's probably overtaken Karim Benzema and Lewandowski this season with the amount of goals he's scored. And now the team that he's in to enable him to do that. But, they didn't replace Zinchenko well enough, and they've paid the price for that. But I can't. It's difficult to. It's difficult to look at potential replacements for Partey, because I just think that if your expectation is that you're going to bring in somebody that's as good as him, you're going to end up being disappointed, because Partey is of a level that he's so good at what he does, and so he just is the absolute perfect CDM for what Arteta wants, that you're going to struggle to find someone as good that's available right now, or that has not developed into that player. I think Declan Rice has the chance to become that good in the future. I think people are getting to the point where they're starting to underrate Rice because there's such a fashionability to overrate him for some reason. It's one of those things, isn't it, where things go in and out of fashion. It's like, do you remember those Just Do It Nike rucksacks? They were like the big thing when I was at school. Everyone had them. Like, first person got them, a few people was like, oh, these are quite nice, good for school or whatever. Got to like year 9 when I was there, everyone had them. And now it's a case of, oh no, they're terrible, because everyone's rating them. But then again, they start to go down again, and now it's retro. If you've got a Nike, Just Do It bag, and they come back in fashion. I think with Rice, there's something similar to be said by that. Is that young English guy playing in a team further down the table, helping them to progress up to a potential European qualifiers, which they've done. But now he's been at West Ham for so long and been rated around that £100 million thing that David always said that he was worth for so long, that we suddenly go, he's not worth 100 million. And then that makes people think, he's not very good because he's not worth 100 million.
Correct.
But in reality, he's probably a 60 to 70 million pound player. He's probably worthy of that price tag because he's that good and he can get better. But because of the whole 100 million thing that's been attached to him for so long, we just judge him based on that. And that's not necessarily fair.
No. By the way, your other article where you talked about numbers and not getting hung up on numbers, transfer fees. That's really, you guys should check that out too. Really, really good. I mean, I think we slowly learning lessons, but we still go nuts around transfer window time. And I think the greatest example is Mudryk currently. I mean, I think he will go on to be a star. There's no doubt about it. The guy's talented. He's going through a transition period, but I mean, talk about a great example of that right off the bat here. Okay, couple more and then we'll get you out. Tom, I like this from Kembo. Who is the most influential of all the Gabriels?
When he's fully fit, it has to be Jesus, because he's just such I think he levels up all the players around him. Gabriel, the defender, G6, is great because individually he's really good at his job and what he does. He doesn't necessarily elevate those around him. He covers for Zinchenko, but he doesn't elevate. He's just really good at what he does individually. Jesus, fantastic player, collaboratively, does all that stuff. And Martinelli, similar to his defensive counterpart, really good individually at what he does. I think he can be better creatively. I think that's a part of his game that he needs to be better at, is crossing and getting those cutbacks and learning when the time to pass is. I think sometimes he can hold onto the ball for a bit too long. But Jesus is without a doubt the most kind of, collaborative of the group.
Yeah. I feel like of the I think Jesus is already, because of his Manchester City, pedigree. He's a superstar, right? Star. That's a conversation, right? I think Martinelli has the window to become a superstar, like a culture, like just a megastar. I do.
A Mohamed Salah level winger, without a doubt.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay, let's get you out on this one, seeing as England are playing and a lot of you watching because you like to see Saka play whenever you can and you're missing him. I have to throw this in there. Ian put it in a couple of times, and if I don't ask you, he might get upset with me. No one really cares, but just really quick. I'm glad Benjamin White isn't there. I'm glad the Brazilians aren't with their team. I'm glad everyone's having tea and, wrapped up in a blanket somewhere. Although some people are traveling and having fun as well. Tom?
Do
you care?
I'm an Arsenal fan, first and foremost, before anything else. But I am also an England fan. I support them during the World Cup tournaments, the Euros, less so qualifiers in the Nations League. I can't really get myself up for them, but tournaments I do because of the culture of it. I love going, because in my group of friends, there's only one other Arsenal fan, but we're all England fans for the tournament. We love getting together for the summer tournaments or the winter tournament as it was last time, watching the games together, celebrating together when we win. That's just part and parcel of international football, that you can all enjoy it together. But I am so sick of Gareth Southgate. Like, I'm so done. You know me long enough that I'm not one to kind of really be get the guy out type of person. I stuck with Arteta for a long time and only had a wobble after the Europa League semi-final. But Southgate, what a waste of talent in this England squad. It's criminal. It's genuinely criminal. I think the arguments of he's taken England to a World Cup semi and a Euro final, no. He's cost Arsenal. He's cost England. He's cost England a World Cup final, and he's cost England a European Championship. That's how I look at it. I don't look at him as the success of getting to those stages of competitions. If England had a better coach that could get more from especially offensively out of this group of stars, they'd have potentially got to a World Cup final. Who knows, maybe more. They could have got to they could have won a European champ. I mean, not beating that Italy team that then didn't qualify for the World Cup is just unbelievable that we didn't beat that side. And obviously we
Jorginho
went
dominated.
He did indeed. Very good. Nearly won Ballon d'Or because of that year. But yeah, I think, there's reasons why we lost to France. Obviously, Kane's penalty miss was absolutely huge in that. But France are a better team than us. But yeah, it's ridiculous that Southgate continues to be the manager of this massively talented group of players.
I was actually thinking if Wenger was bored trying to change the rules at FIFA, he would have done great with this team, like playing champagne football with this type of talent and stuff like that. So
yeah, I mean, now Luis Enrique is not at Spain anymore. England should have snapped him up. I know I don't necessarily buy into the whole the England manager has to be English. I don't buy into that too much. You think about the success of the England women's team.
Yes,
and,
Serena.
That's come from having exactly. Like,
I think the culture in the men's team might be different because the women's have been used to maybe seeing that a little bit. But men's, Brazil have done it. Like the Asian teams have done it a lot. The Middle Eastern teams have done it a lot over the years. I think it was who wrote in his book that he got peeved because Capello was watching Italy play during the World Cup. Can't remember what England player said that, and it really annoyed the team that he was cheering for Italy. So
yeah, but that's an individual thing. That's on Capello. Sure, that when you're the England manager and you're an international coach, you have to put your associations with whoever else aside. You put that to a side whilst you're the manager of that team. So that's on him. But for me, like, the England manager does not have to be English. Because for me, then you get into a very dangerous position of saying, well, where does it stop? Does the assistant coach then have to be English? Does the kit man have to be English? Does the bus driver of the team have to be English? Like, it gets into a very sticky situation, which I just don't agree with. It's a bit odd.
Yeah, I mean, I watched a US women's national team dominate, covering them win World Cups and Olympic golds, and they had a Swedish manager and an English manager in doing that. And of course, you bring up England, the Lionesses, and same. So yeah, okay, brilliant stuff from Tom. Lots of you popping in now. Now it's halftime. We're going to leave though, so you can listen to this on replay. It's a great. Share this with your mates, please. This is just really good conversation, and I love doing these kind of. Just directly focusing on one player. And Tom wrote such a good piece about a player that I think we've all fallen in love with and seen just evolve and flourish this season. It's just been brilliant to watch, and long may it continue. What's coming up for you, Tom? What's happening in the next week? Like with the team not being around, what's happening? What can you tell us that you know of? Are they training? Are they off right now? What's the scoop?
Some of the players have been given some time off, as is pretty usual, and then they'll return. They should probably be returning, I imagine, potentially towards the end of this week. Some may have been given some extended time. I'd be shocked if there wasn't a behind closed door friendly. I think that's probably going to be on the cards. The under-21s play on Saturday. So if you're really desperate for some Arsenal, I believe that is actually being shown on the Arsenal website, so you should be able to watch that. But yeah, it's expected that they're back soon from an extended break. Some of them have got. The big question continues to be around Saliba though, and his, if he's going to be back fit, ready. We don't have that information. We'll hear from Arteta Thursday, Friday, so that's when we should get some more info on that. And Nketiah as well, in terms of how badly injured that continues to be, because he was in a boot last week and it seems pretty serious, his ankle injury, but hopefully, we're talking weeks rather than ruled out for the season, but we'll have to wait and see.
Okay. All right. Brilliant stuff. And by the way, if you are gagging to watch a little Arsenal, don't forget our women's team are playing in the North London derby this weekend. I fancy an absolute thrashing this weekend. I really do, especially after a bitterly disappointing evening in Munich.
That was a joke. That was a joke.
I know we didn't finish our chances either, but it's so bad.
Yeah, but there should be
bad.
VAR in that as well. Like, it's ridiculous that there isn't. You know, yeah,
it wasn't great. Okay, so please go and check our community page, and of course we'll pin Tom's articles. Really great stuff. I love sourcing some of these pictures as well, and just seeing Ødegaard giving man of the match. I don't know who's getting man of the match there. I think it's Gabriel after the Fulham game. And let us know what you think in the YouTube comments. Is he really challenging Captain O and Star Boy for that Arsenal Player of the Year? He's having such a great season. You love to see it, and you love to see what Mikel's doing with this team and how they're just elevating game after game after game. Wonderful stuff. Tom, thanks for joining us. You can catch Tom live, of course, The Nut Job, every morning at 8 o'clock. You can follow him here at Tom Canton Media. And of course, if you're not watching the Gooner Talk TV, then I don't know what to say. I really don't. Anything else to add? What is your closing statement for the squaddies this evening, Mr. Canton?
Just try to take, there should be more to your life than football, and these are the 2 weeks to discover what that is. So, and your horizons, people, beyond just football. But make sure you always come back to the Highbury Squad, because it's definitely worth it.
Awesome stuff. Thanks, everyone. Take care and enjoy your evening. We will be back live on Monday for Monday Madness. We've got a brilliant show. Super Kev will be back as well. We're going to take tomorrow off and enjoy a nice long weekend. So you do the same. Lots of love. And until then, at ease, everyone, at ease. Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad.